Good morning. For over 400 years, one question has haunted American history. What happened to 117 people who simply vanished? Today we examine the Lost Colony of Roanoke, the first English attempt at permanent settlement in the New World and its most enduring mystery. I'll walk you through the founding, the disappearance, the climate evidence, and the leading theories. Let's begin. Here's our roadmap. First, we establish the 1587 venture and the key figures behind it. Then we reconstruct the disappearance itself, including the drought that archaeology has since revealed. Finally, we weigh the competing theories and what remains genuinely unanswered. Keep the central question in mind throughout. Was this a tragedy, a migration, or something we still misread? Now let's confront the mystery head-on. 117 men, women, and children, farmers, craftsmen, families settled on Roanoke Island in 1587. When Governor John White finally returned in 1590, the village was empty. Houses dismantled rather than destroyed, no sign of violence, and a single word carved into a post. No mass grave, no wreck, no bodies. That silence is the engine of 4 centuries of speculation. Hold on to that image. An empty clearing and one carved word, because every theory that follows must explain it. To understand the disappearance, we have to understand what was attempted. This was not a national project, but a private gamble, underwritten by Sir Walter Raleigh and licensed by Queen Elizabeth I. Roanoke was meant to be England's beachhead in the New World, a base for privateering and a claim against Spain. The stakes were high, the funding fragile, and the timing unfortunate. Let's look at the venture itself. Raleigh never set foot on Roanoke. He orchestrated from London. Earlier military expeditions in 1585 and 1586 had soured relations with the local Algonquian peoples and left the region unstable. The 1587 expedition was different. This time, families came, intending to stay. They chose Roanoke Island for its defensible position, but it was small, its soil modest, and its neighbors wary. The colony was fragile from day one. The colony's fate turns on a handful of individuals. John White, its governor, was an artist and mapmaker, a careful observer, but some argue an indecisive leader. His daughter Eleanor and her husband Ananias sailed with him, and their child Virginia Dare became the first English child born in the Americas. And crucially, Manteo, a CROATOAN man who had visited England and returned as an ally, personifies the fragile bridge between two worlds. Remember these names. They shape every theory that follows. Look at the timeline and notice the cruel asymmetry. The colony landed in July 1587. Within weeks, circumstances forced White back to England for supplies. What should have been months stretched into 3 years. War with Spain and the Armada blocked his return. By the time he came back in 1590, the colony had been alone for 3 full years. That gap, the 3 lost years, is where the mystery lives. Everything we don't know happened inside it. Now we arrive at the disappearance itself. August 18, 1590, the day John White stepped ashore and the mystery was born. What he found and what he didn't find is our only evidence. Let's walk through the scene as the historical record describes it. White described a settlement that had been carefully dismantled, not sacked. The houses were taken down and removed, an orderly act, not the aftermath of a massacre. There was no sign of a struggle, no remains, no hastily buried dead. The colonists had left a deliberate signal and moved on. The question is where and why, and whether the word they left was a message or a warning. The signal was a single word carved into a post, CROATOAN, with the letters CRO on a nearby tree. White had agreed with the colonists beforehand that if they left under duress, they would carve a cross. There was no cross, which White read as reassurance they had relocated, not fled in terror. But CROATOAN was both the name of a nearby island and of the people who lived there. That ambiguity is the fork in the road for every theory we'll now examine. For centuries, the disappearance was read purely as a human mystery. But in 1998, dendrochronology, tree ring analysis, added a decisive new variable. The rings show that between 1587 and 1589, the Roanoke region suffered its most severe drought in 800 years. For a small colony dependent on subsistence agriculture, that is not a footnote. it is a plausible cause of collapse. Climate didn't answer the mystery, but it reframed it. With the clues in hand, we can now weigh the explanations. Over 4 centuries, at least 7 serious theories have been proposed, from assimilation and migration to massacre and the supernatural. Some are grounded in physical evidence, others rest on rumor and forgery. Let's rank them by what the evidence can actually support. The strongest case today points to assimilation. The word CROATOAN likely named a destination, Hatteras Island, home of the CROATOAN people. Excavations there have recovered Tudor-era artifacts, and later English settlers recorded accounts of gray-eyed English-speaking natives. More recently, Y-DNA studies have identified a berry cluster linking some Carolina families to the Roanoke colonists. Assimilation remains the only theory that fits the colonists' own signal. Here is the fuller ledger. Assimilation leads. A related theory of inland migration to Site X and Site Y is gaining archaeological support. The drought is best understood as a contributing cause rather than a complete explanation. The Spanish raid and Powhatan massacre theories are recorded but weakly evidenced, and the famous Dare stones were almost certainly a 20th century forgery. Notice what's absent: any theory that accounts for all 117 people at once. That is precisely why the mystery persists. So where does that leave us? Roanoke is not a story with a solution. It is a case study in the limits of evidence. The likely answer, assimilation into the CROATOAN people under the pressure of drought, is probable, not proven. As scholars, we should resist the urge to force a tidy ending. The empty clearing and the carved word remain, 4 centuries on, a reminder of how much history we may never recover. Thank you.